G'day, I'm Martyn Iles, and this is The Truth of It. And today's episode is a bit of a one-off, bit of a special, it's a bit unique, whatever you want to call it. It's an interview that I did a few days ago for the young people of Regent's Park Christian School in Sydney, Australia, on the subject of being not ashamed. I want to say thanks to the school. I want to say thanks to Tim Chavura, the biblical studies teacher who interviewed me, for making the footage available. And before we throw to it, I just have one thing to say, and it's this. We're in the middle of ACL's end of financial year appeal right now. We have a mountain to climb to continue to make this ministry viable into another year. And I want to say to you, if you've been blessed by this ministry, if you've been blessed by our motto, truth made public, whether on social media or in politics or elsewhere, and if you want to stand with us to proclaim truth to transform politics and culture, I'd ask you to pause this and go to acl.org.au/support. And for your gift of any amount, we are extremely grateful. Thank you. Without further ado, here's me and Tim.
Martyn, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure, Tim. Great to be here.
Last year, 2019, was a big year for the Australian Christian lobby and obviously for you as well. I think I saw you on Sunrise, The Today Show, 60 Minutes, and even, dare I say, The Project.
Yes, that's right.
I've got a few questions, but what's going on in your mind the 10 minutes before you go to air? What are you doing? How are you prepping for that?
I'm just as cool, calm and collected as I look on the screen.
But you do look calm. And actually, seriously, that's the one thing that when I speak to other Christians, whether they're of different denominations or mine, they're just amazed at how well you handle the situation. There was this one interview you did with Koshi in the morning. I think you did two with him.
Did, yeah.
And one of them, it was a bit more combative, where he accused the Bible. He said the Bible supports slavery and all sorts of things. And the way that you handle that is just, it's a great model for how we should handle those sorts of attacks. But I just want to know, obviously you're nervous. You are human. Yep. What are you doing in that time to prep for that?
I got to say, it's funny, I was listening to an interview with a soldier, a veteran from the war, and he said, he learned something in war. He said, there's two kinds of people. He said, it's not the difference between people who are scared and people who are not scared. Everyone gets scared. Right. He said, some people can think when they're scared. And I heard that interview and I thought, oh, that's me. I can still think when I'm scared. And I think maybe that's part of it. But that's not a mistake. It's not, I don't even know if it's natural, because there's probably a time in my life when I couldn't think when I was nervous and scared. And I think that there's two things that go into it in the background. The first one is preparation. You don't go into anything unless you are as prepared as you can be. So there's a lot of work that goes on. I walk around my hotel room just yelling out answers to hypothetical questions.
The worst type of questions.
The worst type of questions.
Not on your side. These people are trying to trip you up.
That's their only ambition. They don't care what I have to say.
Yes.
They don't care about unfolding and finding out what I actually think. All they're thinking is, how can we trick him? How can we make him fall on his face? What form of words can we put to him that make him blurt something out that sounds terrible, and we can pick that out as a soundbite and potentially ruin his career? And that's the environment into which I'm going. And I know that this is make or break.
Yes.
It only requires me to put 1 foot wrong, hit the landmine, and we've got a crisis on our hands. And it's not because I think anything outrageous, it's just because they're actually trying to trip me up. And that's the reality. And you feel it. And after weeks of doing this sort of thing, and that week that in question that I did those interviews, I did, several dozen a day for radio, TV, print. I was on every news network every night for 3-4 nights.
Yes, I remember that.
And it gets very oppressive after a while. But you prepare. You never go in unprepared. There's a lot of work that goes into the background. You think it through, you talk it out. I've got a guy I ring and we run through it on the phone. I think of the worst possible scenario. And I think, what am I going to say? I think, there was some really inflammatory questions put to me. I'd thought about them beforehand, because I thought, man, if they really want to get me, they might ask this.
Yes.
But that's one P. The other P is prayer. And it's not, preparation is so key. But I do spend an awful lot of time in prayer beforehand as well. And I just know that, and I know that during some of those really intense times, the only reason I didn't put a foot wrong was because I felt really helped. I really knew God's presence, and I knew that I was being helped to say what I had to say. And so both of those things are crucial.
Yes. I like one thing you said, their agenda is to try and trip you up. What I'm gathering from you, your agenda is to present truth.
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting that you've got this totally different agenda from what the world is trying to do. And actually your program, your internet program is called The Truth of It. Just before we get into some other things about Christian maturity, why truth?
Why truth? Oh, that's a really good question. And I thought long and hard about that. And I do speak often about truth. I think that truth is the thing that's lost in the noise so often. I mean, for example, you made a good point. When I go into the TV network and sit down, usually, as a rule, they're not interested in the truth. They've got an agenda. And so many people go into things with agendas. So many people live their life with agendas. They know where they want to be, they know what they want to achieve, and they live their life controlling their circumstances to get what they want. It's not about agendas. It's got to be about what is actually true, which means that you go on a journey first and you try and find out for yourself what is true, and you be prepared to change yourself in response to what is true, and then you go out there and you try and, as best you can, tell others what's true, because you know that it's going to help and change them. And that's a very different mindset, a very different way to live. But as Christians, we've got to do it, because Jesus actually says that it's the truth that sets you free. And, there's so much in that. So a lot of people say to me, the things you stand for and the things you say are all about oppression and they're hurting people. I'm saying, that's not why I'm saying them. I'm saying them because you don't realize something. You don't realize that there's freedom, there's liberty, there's every good thing in the truth. And people often try and locate other values. Like they say, when you say the truth like that, you're not being compassionate. I say, well, hang on, only the truth is compassionate. Because the truth tells us what's really wrong with the world. The truth gives us the real answers to what's wrong with the world. The truth helps people. The truth about the gospel, for example, sets people free, as Jesus says, brings people every good thing. So the truth really is the thing that's been lost in the noise these days. And I feel as though, I know that so much of the answer to what's going on around us is to bring that back to the forefront so that people can find it.
So what do you think it means to be a mature Christian?
Gosh. I'm not sure, when I think about that, that I ever think anybody feels like they are a mature Christian.
Sure. Yep.
And I think that might be the answer. I think to be a Christian is to be always changing. We live in a world that says, don't change, be who you are. Be your best self. Follow your dreams. Just do you, I heard someone say once.
Yes.
And I thought, what vacuous advice that is. Just be the same. Champion what you are as you are. That's not the Christian life. The Christian life is about saying, well, actually, there's my life is about change. My life is about growth. My life is about character. My life is about moving forwards. As a great litmus test, I think, of your Christian life is to say, am I different from 12 months ago? Have I learned things from God's Word? Have I learned things about Christian character? Have I learned things about how I should be? And have I changed? Have I grown?
So you're comparing yourself to yourself.
Comparing yourself to yourself, exactly. What you were and what you are. And that is crucial. I mean, the Bible puts it in terms like it says, we're being transformed from one degree of glory into another. This whole idea that actually there is the perfect me that I will be when I get to heaven, but the job now is to transform from one stage into another. There's a great metaphor in the book of James, in the first chapter, where it talks about a guy who looks into a mirror.
Yes.
And he looks into the mirror, and we immediately get this sense that when we look into a mirror and we see ourselves, we usually react. I've got food in my teeth. I've got bed hair. You've got all these problems. Yeah. Do I go, stupid mirror, show me food in the teeth, good grief, and walk off and go through my day? Right. Of course I don't. No, I fix it.
Yes.
And the book of James is saying, the Bible, the Word of God, is just like that. When you are drinking it in, when you're studying it, what you should be doing is saying, oh my goodness, I fall short here, I fall short there. There's things that I could do better to grow. This is what Jesus was like. I'm to be like Jesus. And we don't sit there and go, oh, that verse doesn't make me feel good, I'll read another one. Yes. What we're called to do is we're looking in the mirror. fix the bed hair, change, grow. And that's so important. Of course, it raises questions then about, well, what are we growing into? And I think that the answer to that question is well, it's how we're made. We're made in God's image. We fall short of that in so many ways. I say, well, I'm in the image of God. Well, why do you tell lies? Are you really? Yeah. Well, it's a calling as well. It's something we're called to. And that verse I mentioned before, change from one degree of glory into another, into the image of Christ. And that's the goal of the Christian life, is to find out what God requires of me and to change.
I was going to say, it seems to be such a countercultural message that you have. And this is a school, you're talking to young people from years 7 to 12. Why are you saying that to young people?
I'm saying that to young people, firstly, because it's true.
Good answer.
As we were saying before. Yeah. It's absolutely true, but there are some truths that are particularly timely, and I think every generation faces, there's different lies in every generation that need to be fought.
Yes.
And one of the big lies today, and the reason I focus a little bit on this, one of the big lies going around today is that you are good as you are. And that's not correct.
But it sounds so nice.
Of course it sounds nice, but it's his... And the Bible compliments us once. It says that we're made in the image of God, right? Doesn't compliment us again. I challenge anyone to find, page after page, it sounds warnings.
Yes,
it says some, and this is what you've discovered when you read it. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Says Jeremiah. There's none righteous, no, not one. Says Paul. Our righteousness are as filthy rags. There's none that does good, none that seeks after God. We have a reprobate mind. That's in one part of the King James Bible. What does that even mean? We're dead in trespasses and sins, and I could go on all day. And it's interesting. We were made in the image of God. But I was in Europe a couple of years ago, and I was in Austria. There's some beautiful castle ruins in Austria. They're beautiful, amazing, from the 1100s and the 1000s and all this on top of hills, and you can go and look at them. And you might go to some really beautiful examples of these ruins, and there might even be a plaque outside. And it might say, Count von Who's-me What's-it once lived here, and it tells the story. And you look at it and you think, is that a castle? Yes and no. It's a ruin of a castle.
Sure.
And I heard a preacher once say very powerfully, a human being, it's almost like there's a sign next to us saying God once lived here. We were made great. We were made in God's image, and we fell. And in that fall, we're racked by imperfections. We're racked by sin. We're people who we can achieve so much good, and yet there's a fatal flaw that runs through us. There's people who are a contradiction. Why is it that people are so capable of such great things? Why is it they've got such tremendous minds on them? Why is it that we can be so civilized? And yet why is it that we can be so horrible to each other? Why is it that we can be so debased in what we do with our lives? Why is it that the world is a mess of war and conflict? And why are there race riots in America right now? And there's this tremendous contradiction taking place. And that's what the fall's done to us. And I think that this generation faces this difficulty that says, no, you're okay. You're fine just as you are. All the sin and evil in the world, it's all out there. It's the isms and the phobias, the sexism and the racism, and it's the homophobia, and it's the patriarchy, and it's the culture, and it's the society. It's all these things, and it's the climate change that you can't control. It's all these things that are outside of you. But you go, hang on, why would bad things happen? Because when people get together, it looks bad, because people all have a fatal flaw. And when you combine all those people together and their fatal flaws, you get some good stuff and you get some terrible stuff. And so I really want to push back against that narrative that the bad is all out there and the good is all in here. Jesus comes along and says, I'm going to tell you a secret. Actually, the bad is in there. And that's why it's out there, because this society's just full of people doing stuff. And you can't control society. You'll never control the world. You can do your little bit, but you can't control things the way that people think they can, but you can control yourself. You can be someone who actually says, do you know what? I was made to image God. I was made to be like Jesus, who is the image of God, says the New Testament. And I was made to grow into that. And there's sin in my heart, and by dealing with that, God can use me to do an awful lot of good things. Which is the other point, which is that throughout the Bible you see that God looks at the earth, it's a mess, as we've just been describing in many ways, and he usually changes the world through one person. That's all he needs. And he just fights, he says, he looks at a generation, he says, who can I use? Who here? And usually it says something like Abraham was righteous before God, or Noah found grace and favor in the eyes of God, or Mary found grace. There's guys and there's girls, and God picks one and he says, you. You're not fancy, you're not special, you're not a powerful person, you might not even be smart, but you're the kind of person I can use, because you are saying, what's my life about? My life is about growing into the image of God. I'm sold out to God's will for my life. I know that I'm not what I ought to be, but I know that God has everything that I need.
Yes.
And it's those people that he picks and he uses to change things.
Well, let's talk about picking people, because I'm interested to know, what do you think young people, young Christians can contribute to our country at this moment in time? Is there a path for them? Is there a direction for them? I'm sure there is. What would you say to young people that you might not say to an older generation, for example?
I would say to a young person, there's a lot of things about life for young people that they don't know the answer to. What am I going to do with my life? What job am I going to have? What's my career going to be? Who am I going to marry? That's what some people start to think about when they get their later teens. Where should I live? There's all these questions that start to come up, and we go, I don't know the answers. It's interesting. I've heard a guy say once, God has given us the answers to 90%. There's only really 10% that he hasn't given us the answers to, and we're always really obsessing over the 10%.
Right.
What did Jesus say? He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these things, what you're going to wear, what you look like, where your money's going to come from, all the things that worry people. For young people, those are different things, but we wake up every day with things that we're concerned about. He says, all these things will be added unto you. The rest will fall into place. And I think for a young person looking ahead at life, yes, those questions come up, but I'd say they're peripheral questions. Or by peripheral, I mean they're at the edges. They're not the main game.
Yep.
The main game we lose sight of is, I think we need to ask the question, how can I be the person who God can use? Because if you're the person who God can use, you don't need a plan for your life, because he'll plan it, because he can use you. And he'll just, and I've found this in my life, it's incredible. He'll put you here and then he'll put you there, and you're just so aware that God is opening doors, he's orchestrating circumstances. And I think that what God wants is he wants people who he can use. And in order to be a person who God can use, it means I'm going to say you're pure in heart. That's one of the Beatitudes. I've got a coin at home, and it says it says a little certificate in it, and it says 99.98% silver. I used to think as a kid, they got so close. Come on. How hard could it have been to get to the 100? Exactly. Rubbish. It's actually really pure, 99.98%. See, something that's pure is it's really sold out to one thing. It's only got one. It's unmixed.
Yes.
It doesn't have more than one thing in it. And a pure heart is an unmixed heart. It's only got one allegiance. It's got a love for one thing. And a pure in heart person, it says in the Beatitudes, is someone who sees God. So the thing that their heart is concerned with is doing God's will, knowing who God is, and as we said before, changing in response to who God is and what God requires of us. Those kinds of people in this generation, who aren't just saying, you do you, I'm just going to be myself, I'm going to serve myself in my life, I'm going to have a selfish life, I'm going to be faithful to me. Not those people. God's saying, who's going to be faithful to me? Wow. Because he never stops working. In every generation, he's doing things. He's always at work in the world. And he's always saying, the amazing thing is he uses people. Always. And so he's saying, who can I use? Is really the question God asks. And he needs those people available to him. So I say to young people, what is it you'll be concerned about? Be the person God can use.
You've spoken a lot about Christians being used by God. I guess that implies that they have to be willing to actually be a light. And not just be a Christian, but actually to be a light in a dark world. What would you say to young Christians about not just being a Christian, but actually being a public Christian, or being a Christian in the public sphere, whether it be in their classroom, even their home sometimes, or the university or the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's essential. Was talking about the fact, to be a light, Jesus talks about that, right? And he says there's a few different kinds of light. There's lights that are hidden away. And there's lights that are on lampstands. I've got a light in my face right now. And you can see it. Everyone in the room can see it. And then there's lights that are city set on hills that cannot be hidden. That's a huge challenge for me, because I sit there and I go, wow, I spent a lot of my life with the light hidden away. I could go places and meet people and talk to people, and I could choose whether or not I divulged my faith to them.
Yes.
I could choose whether or not I mentioned anything about Jesus or the gospel or truth in general to them at all. And I could adapt. But then I got this job at a place called the Australian Christian Lobby. And in Australia, when you meet someone, the first thing they ask you is, what do you do? And everyone, basically knows who the Australian Christian Lobby is.
Yes. Yeah.
At the time I took the job, it was a little bit infamous because I've been involved in some pretty controversial issues. And I would go to university even, because I was studying my master's, and people would say, what do you do? Yeah. And all of a sudden I realised I couldn't hide.
Yes.
And I had to say, sometimes I'd say I'm a lobbyist. They'd always say, who do you lobby for? Australian Christian Lobby. Anyway, what do you do? And you had that brand on your forehead and you couldn't escape. Even if the person you looked at and you thought, man, you are not going to be a fan, you had to say it. And sometimes they'd actually step back from you and go, as if you'd just done something terrible. And I thought, you know what? The light's been under a basket. The light's been hidden away. It hasn't even been on. And Jesus makes this point. He says, when the light is on, he said, two things happen. One, persecution. He says the first thing is, not everyone's going to like it. You are going, and this is the effect of speaking truth and standing for truth in the world. Is that because we're in a fallen world, as we were saying before, the whole contradiction of being great and yet being terrible, you're going to get this dual reaction. What kind of world are we in? A fallen world. So first thing you're going to see is some negative blowback. And Jesus says people will revile you. That means that they'll abuse you. They'll insult you. They'll feel like you're an awful person. Don't be discouraged by that, is my first thing. This is not easy. It's not easy. Now, if you want an easy life, don't be a Christian. There's a challenge here that's put down. If you want a blessed life, as Jesus is saying right before the verse about being the light of the world, be a Christian, right? But that's not the same as easy. And so he calls you to do something that seems hard at first. And when you do it, he says, expect the negative reaction. I get that all the time. I get lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of hate.
Can I just interject there? What do you do with that? Because you I don't know, you must receive just hundreds of messages in a week, or maybe even a day, depending on what's going on. What do you do when you receive these messages?
It's funny, I should come up with a good answer to this, because I get... part of me is...
Is it your character that it just doesn't seem to...
I think there's definitely a personality thing, which is that on the whole I don't care. Right. Now, why don't I care though? There's got to be a reason, And I think part of it's not just personality, it's just that there's management of expectations, as I'm saying right now, which is that what do you expect? And Jesus gives us the expectations. Yes. Firstly, there's going to be negative. I'm about to get to positive. There's two things going on. So there's an expectations management. Fallen world, right? Sinful world, sinful people. And when you say things that are true, you can fully expect that part of the reaction will be negative. And so there's that clarity that comes with that. The other thing is that I guess if you, in your life, really care about, whose approval are you really looking for? That's something that it doesn't come overnight, that suddenly you say, oh, I only care about God's approval. I don't care about that person. Nobody's there straight away. We're always a little bit of fear of men, a little bit of concern about, what our peers think of us, what others will think of us. Hard for me. I've lost friends over the last few years. That's a challenge. Wow. When you have someone who's been a friend with you for years and they turn around and say, I cannot speak to you anymore. Because of, what you stand for in public squares. That's challenging. And do you care? Of course you care. Of course it hurts. But there's a great peace that comes with the fact that, you know that you have been trying to the best of your ability to seek God's approval. And in acting that out in your life, you've tried to the best of your ability to do it as well as you can for the best motives you can muster. The important thing is you can go to bed at night with a peaceful heart and you can say, look, this is in God's hands. You can commit these things to God in prayer, and you can develop over a period of time a concern for God's approval. But the third part of the answer comes with where I was just going before, which is that you get the negative. What's the other side of it? You get the positive. Because Jesus finishes that section by talking about being the light, talking about the persecution, and then he says, and talk about the blessing as well. But he also says then, and people will see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. And I guess I feel very blessed to have known both sides of that coin. I've seen the negative, but gosh, you see God's work taking place. I mean, last year, for example, when Israel Folau lost his job, that was a moment when, our staff were getting death threats. There was awful abuse coming into the office. There was, the journalists I described before are just trying to trip you up all the time. You can it's palpable, the sense of loathing that's coming off of them. But, the number of people who would just stop me in the street, ordinary folks, not powerful people like the journalists and that who are yelling at you, not the people who are ringing up and causing all the trouble, but you walk down the street in the Sydney CBD and several people would stop you and say, thank you. Wow. Good on you. Young people, I get a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old would say, this has helped me be bold. This has helped me stand for my faith. I really appreciate it. I've had people send messages since saying, this is my testimony. I've come back to the church. I've come back to my faith because of what I saw. And you get these, God gives you these little shreds of, knowledge of the good that's happened. And I think that you mentioned the project before and how hostile that was. On the project, it was quite amazing. I prayed before the interview started. I just had a moment where I said, Lord, if I get a chance to say the gospel in this, because I was thinking the Apostle Paul. I thought, what would the Apostle Paul do with a forum like this, where they're going to just jump down his neck? And I thought, do you know what he'd do? He'd give it the beans. He'd just preach.
Thanks for the free airtime.
Exactly. Like, now that I'm here, let me tell you about Christ who died for it. Like, he'd just go for it. And so I thought, give me the chance. And sure enough, they gave me the chance.
And it wasn't cut out.
It wasn't cut out. They asked me twice. I answered twice. And they kept the whole thing in, which is just a miracle all by itself. The Lord gave me the chance. And I thought, well, this is it. And so I just did it. And I pointed out the fact that every one of us is going to, on a day as real as this one, will stand before God and be judged. Wow. And every one of us, in our own strength, will be lacking in that judgment. But, of course, Christ is the answer, and the cross of Jesus is where we go. And I got to say that. And I thought, the ratings on that program... the hundreds of thousands of homes into which that went.
That's right.
I got text messages and Facebook messages from people I hadn't seen for 10 years saying, I just saw you on the project, And I thought, I don't know what the fruit of that will be.
And you replied, what are you watching the project for?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Don't watch the project.
We'll talk.
No, but the good that came from that is indisputable, and God gives you those glimpses sometimes. And here's the other thing. The hostility is very up in your face and angry. You get that all the time. Our office has been car bombed, for heaven's sakes. I mean, we've had all sorts of crazy. I mean, I could list the crazy. I've walked down the street, had people stalk me, come up to me, abuse me, swear in my face, all this stuff. And that's discouraging. And all you can say is, look, I'm sorry, God bless you, and, there's nothing you can do. But that can be up in your face and hostile, and it discourages you, and that's what it's meant to do. But so often the good stuff happens real quietly. There's a lot of people out there who are just listening, a lot of people out there who just need some hope, a lot of people out there asking questions. And if you know that promise, that firstly, people will see your good works and they will glorify your Father in heaven, there is light. The light does have an effect. If you know that promise, then it encourages you to continue. And also Jesus says right before that, blessed are the persecuted. So there's a blessing that comes as well in that, which is, I used to read the book of Acts, for example, and you'd see the disciples get chucked in jail and they'd sing hymns all night. And I'd sit there and go, they're nuts. These guys were actually crazy. They must have been slightly unhinged. But, I've never been chucked in jail. But I got to tell you, as I've gotten older, I've thought, you know what, they weren't nuts. Because that's a promise of God. Blessed are the persecuted. And I think there's something that you know of God, His character, His presence, the joy of your faith and all that you wouldn't otherwise know if you didn't go through these experiences.
It
It
can
draws you
function
in.
as a confirmation that you're actually doing the right
100%.
thing.
100%. It's amazing what peace you can have. That thing that's so scary at first, you think, I open my mouth, it's going to be such a negative experience. And you shy away from it. I just say, don't shy away from it. If you want God's work to be done in the world, if you want people to be reached, and also if you just want to know the blessing of Christ in a richer way, go for it. Just go for it. And I think those confidences really help.
Martyn, thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, before you go, I have one more thing to say. If you're between 18 and 25 or thereabouts, and you too want to be not ashamed in this post-Christian age, if you want to be grounded in your faith to answer the tough questions and meet culture head on, especially as you go to university and things like that and get into a secular career, we have a program for you. It's here in Canberra. It's called GPS. It's very affordable. It runs over 8 days. The next one will be from the 19th of July, and I'd like to invite you to come and meet with some of Australia's top Christian thinkers. I'll be there as well. The questions that will be answered, the stuff that will be talked about will be really worthwhile, and it will equip you as you step out into life in a post-Christian age. Go to acl.org.au/GPS to find out all the details. Or maybe you know someone who's roughly in that age bracket who you think would benefit. I'd love it if you could pass the link on to them. See you there.